My name is Amira Bent Abdullah, and I feel I need to share my story with you. It's about how Jesus Christ, peace be upon him, found me. And he found me in the most unlikely place anyone could ever imagine, behind the walls of a royal compound in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I know how that sounds. I swear I do. Even today, sitting in this tiny apartment, thousands of miles from the palace where I grew up, I sometimes wake up in the middle of the night and my heart is racing, and I wonder if it was all just a dream, if I imagined every second of it. But then, in the dark, I look at my own hands. They are the same hands that once wore diamond bracelets so expensive, so very expensive, that they were worth more than most people earn in an entire lifetime of work. Now, these hands are here, in front of me, empty, no jewels, no weight, and that's how I know. I know it was real. Every part, everything that happened, from the first moment until now, was the most real thing in my life. For you to understand the miracle that it is for me to be here today, writing this, I need you to understand the world I came from. It's not easy to describe because it sounds like something from a movie, but it was my reality. I was born into a kind of privilege that most people don't even know exists. My father was a prince. He wasn't in the direct line of succession to the throne, but he was close enough that our family lived in a luxury that I don't even know how to explain properly. Our compound, there in Riyadh, wasn't a house. It was almost a private city, and it had walls, high walls surrounding everything on all sides. When I was a child, I thought those walls existed to protect us, to keep the world out there, away from us. I felt safe, but I was so naive, so blind. I only realized much, much later that those walls didn't just serve to keep people out. They served mainly to keep us in. They were the walls of my prison. Every morning was the same. I would wake up in a room that was larger, I swear, larger than most apartments I see around here. The first sensation of the day was always the cold marble floor beneath my feet. Even with the absurd heat of Saudi Arabia outside, that floor was always cold. It was a cold that seemed to creep up my body. Then I would go to my closet. It's even hard to talk about this today. I had hundreds of abayas, hundreds, each one more expensive and more luxurious than the last. Designer pieces from Paris, from Milan, that I was forced to wear over my other designer clothes whenever I had to leave the women's quarters. Looking from the outside, I had absolutely everything a young woman could dream of. Wealth, status, beauty, luxury. I had it all, but it was all a lie. Because I had everything, except the one thing my soul was desperately searching for, a thing I didn't even know how to name at the time, an emptiness that none of it could fill. My days followed a rhythm that never, ever changed. It was a suffocating routine. Private tutors came to the compound to teach me and my sisters. We learned English, French, mathematics, literature. We were educated, yes, very cultured, but everything happened within those walls. Always within the walls. Always supervised, always watched by someone. We were never alone. My brothers' lives were completely different. They could leave the compound whenever they wanted. They could and did study abroad. They could truly live. But for us, the women, even being royalty, the world was incredibly small and carefully controlled. I remember the shopping trips we used to take. Twice a year we would go to London or Paris. Always with guardians, of course. And I would be there, on those expensive streets, and I would see other women my age. They walked freely. They laughed with friends, sat in cafes without fear, and I would look at them, and something inside me would ache. A pang, a pain I couldn't explain. I had to swallow that feeling and buy another expensive handbag, as if more luxury could silence this pain. The religious obligations were just part of life. It was like breathing. 5 times a day, we heard the call to prayer. We fasted during Ramadan. We memorized verses from the Quran. I did all of it. I swear I did it all. But it was all mechanical. It was as if my body was there, bowing and rising, but my soul, my heart, was not present. I would kneel on my prayer mat, an expensive mat, of course, and recite the words in Arabic, but I never felt anything. No connection, no peace, just obligation. And to be honest, I felt fear. Fear of what would happen if I didn't comply. It was an empty ritual. But what really started to bother me, more than my own emptiness, was the hypocrisy I saw every day. A hypocrisy so obvious, it was suffocating. My uncles and my older cousins, inside the compound, they were the guardians of morality. They demanded that we, the women, cover ourselves completely, that we speak softly, that we never, ever question anything. The family's honor depended on us. But I knew what they did when they traveled. I heard the whispered conversations between my aunts. I saw the photos they forgot on their phones, the parties in Europe, the alcohol, the women. They were completely different lives, and that ate me up inside. It became clear to me that the rules, the laws, the religion itself seemed to be different for men. The rules were different for those who had power. And this began to plant seeds of questioning in my mind. They were thoughts that I could never, ever speak aloud. If I spoke them, I don't know what would have become of me. They were thoughts so dangerous that I barely had the courage to form them inside my own head, afraid that someone might hear. I would think, if God is truly merciful and loving, as they teach us, why do I feel so much fear all the time? I lived in fear. Fear of my father, of my brothers, of the guardians, of the religious police. Fear of judgment. If Islam was the absolute and only truth, why did I feel so incredibly empty when I prayed? Why did I feel nothing but obligation? If paradise was the final reward for this obedience, why did my life here, now, with all this luxury and privilege, feel so much like a prison? These questions were like embers burning under my skin. I tried to ignore them, tried to be a good daughter, a good Muslim, but the questions wouldn't go away. They only grew. I was 19 when something changed. It was just a moment, but it was as if a tiny crack appeared in the wall around me. We were in London, on one of our annual shopping trips. I was in Knightsbridge, a place where money flows like water, and I managed, I don't know how, to get a little distance from my cousins. I just wanted a few seconds alone, seconds without being watched, seconds to breathe the cold London air without someone looking over my shoulder. I was walking fast, head down, and that's when I passed in front of a church, an old stone building, and from inside I heard music coming out. It was like nothing I had ever heard. It wasn't the pop music we listened to in secret. It wasn't the classical music from our tutors, and it certainly wasn't the Arabic music from our home. It was something haunting. It was beautiful, but it had a depth, a pain and a joy mixed together that made my heart ache. I can't explain it. I stopped walking. I just stopped. I stood there, frozen on the sidewalk, in the middle of London. I don't know how long I stood there. A minute? 5? People were walking past me, giving me sideways glances. I must have looked like a bizarre statue. A Saudi young woman, covered from head to toe, stopped and staring at a church as if she were seeing a ghost. But I couldn't move. There was something in that music that was pulling me from within, a force that was literally tugging at my heart. I felt my eyes filling with tears. I didn't even know why I was crying. I wasn't sad. I don't know. And then, suddenly, I felt a hand grab my arm, hard, her nails dug into me. It was my cousin, Noor. Her voice was sharp, full of panic and anger. "What are you doing standing there? Have you gone mad?" She pulled me violently, dragging me away from the church. She kept looking back, terrified, checking to see if any of our guardians or my brother had seen my pause. Later, at the hotel, she confronted me. The fear in her eyes was real. She warned me never again, ever again, to show interest in a place like that. "They can kill you for that, Amira." Even in London, far from home, we were still on a leash. The cage was just a little bigger, but I couldn't forget. I couldn't get that music out of my head, and the feeling it gave me. It was as if someone, for the first time, had knocked on a locked door inside my heart. A door I didn't even know existed. As soon as we returned to Riyadh, that feeling I had in London began to fade. It was like trying to hold water in your hands. The music, the feeling, everything was swallowed up again by the routine, by the heat, by the heavy silence of the palace. But the memory of it, the memory of having felt something, made the emptiness I felt even worse, even heavier. The compound walls seemed to get taller. The the silence of our home seemed deeper. I turned 20, then I turned 21, and my life was a repetition. Classes, lunches, fittings for expensive dresses, for parties where I couldn't talk to anyone. And then, my parents started talking about the future, which, of course, was not my future. It was the future they were planning for me. The word marriage started to be said. Not to me, but about me, in rooms where I wasn't present, or in whispers I wasn't supposed to hear. Names of princes from other families, sons of businessmen with the right connections. My future was being drawn up like the blueprint of a house, and I was just a piece of furniture that would be placed inside. And not once, not a single time, did anyone turn to me and ask, "Amira, what do you want?" The truth is, I wouldn't even have known what to answer. I didn't know what I wanted. I only knew, with every fiber of my being, what I didn't want. And I didn't want that. I didn't want to be a bargaining chip, a business deal to strengthen the family. And the loneliness began to consume me in a different way. I would spend hours and hours sitting on the balcony of my room, which was enormous, watching the sun set over Riyadh. The sky would turn orange, then purple, then pink. It was such a vast, free beauty, and I felt so small and so trapped down below. The beauty outside only made the emptiness inside seem larger and darker. And I had my laptop, my cell phone, I had internet access. A lot of people think we are completely isolated, but it's not like that. We have access, but it's all monitored. I knew it was watched, but even so, I saw the world. I saw other people's lives on Instagram, on YouTube. I saw their freedom, their joy, their choices, and I prayed. I used the only prayers I knew, the ones I had been taught my whole life 5 times a day. And I would ask, in silence, "God, why do I feel so alone?" I was surrounded by people, sisters, cousins, servants, guards, but I was the loneliest person in the world. My younger sister Mariam and I were very close. She is 3 years younger than me, and she still had an innocence that I felt I had already lost forever. She was happy. She believed in everything we were taught, without question. She spoke with an excitement that pained me, talked about the future, about the wonderful husband she would have, about the beautiful children she would raise. She accepted the script that was written for her. She didn't see the cage. She saw a beautiful, blessed future. And sometimes, I swear to God, I envied her. A deep envy for her certainty. Envy for the simple faith she had. She didn't seem to feel the emptiness I felt. She didn't seem to see the hypocrisy I saw in our uncles and cousins. Or maybe she did, but she chose to ignore it. I don't know. I just know that she slept peacefully at night. She would lay her head on the pillow and sleep. I could barely sleep. I would spend nights wide awake, staring at the ceiling of my luxurious room, and the only thing that ran through my mind over and over was, is this it? Is life just going to be this? And I don't want you to think there were no happy moments. Of course there were. It wasn't total darkness. The family gatherings could be fun, full of food and laughter. My mother, despite all her strictness, loved us, in her own way, the only way she learned to love. My father, when he wasn't being the prince, when he was relaxed, he knew how to be gentle. My sisters made me laugh until my stomach hurt. But underneath it all, underneath the laughter and the dinners and the jewels, there was this constant awareness, this low hum, that nothing was truly mine. Not my body, not my choices, not my thoughts. Everything belonged to the family. Everything belonged to the honor that we, women, had to protect. And I started to notice things I had always ignored, things I didn't want to see. The way the servants were treated, especially the foreign workers, from the Philippines, from India, they were almost invisible to us. The way our wealth isolated us from any real-world problems. The way the word love was almost never spoken, but the word duty was hammered into our heads every single day. And the fear. I realized that fear governed everything, even in a palace with marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Fear was what kept everything, and everyone, running. It happened about 6 months before everything changed. It was a hot, stuffy night, like most nights in Riyadh. I couldn't sleep again. The air conditioning was on high, but I felt like I couldn't breathe. The silence of the house was heavy, oppressive, and I did something I had never done before. Something small, but which at the time felt like a rebellion. I got out of bed, opened the glass door to my balcony, which was forbidden at night, and I stepped out. The heat of the night hit me immediately, a dense, dry wave. I leaned on the stone railing, which was still warm from the day's sun. The compound was silent, just the security lights on. And I looked up. I looked at the sky. Because of the city lights, I couldn't see many stars, just a few stubborn ones twinkling up high. And that night, I didn't pray the prayers I was taught. I didn't recite anything. For the first time in my life, I just spoke from my heart. It was a whisper. I was afraid that even the walls could hear me. I said something like, if there is a God, anywhere, a God who truly loves me, who truly sees me, not the God my uncles use to control us, but a real God, please show me, please show me. I am so tired. I am so tired of pretending and of being empty. If there is truth somewhere, please let me find it. I had no idea what I had done. To me, it was just the venting of a desperate girl in the darkness. I didn't know that prayer would be answered. I didn't know that the God I was screaming to in whispers was already moving toward me, that he always had been. And I had no idea at all what that answer would cost me. If someone had appeared to me on that balcony that night and told me everything that was going to happen, that to find the truth I would have to lose everything I knew, that to find true love I would be cut off from my family, that to find freedom I would become a fugitive. If someone had told me the price, would I have prayed that prayer? Honestly, I don't know. I really don't. I was broken and desperate, yes, but I was also comfortable in my golden cage. I had never known anything else. The walls were a prison, but they were a familiar prison. They were the only home I had ever known. But God knew. He knew I was ready, even if I didn't know it myself. He knew my heart was already searching for him, even if I didn't know his name yet. The following days continued in the same routine as always. Breakfast with my mother and sisters, classes with the tutors, lunch, more classes, time on my phone, dinner, always with that clear division between men and women. And then, the long nights, where I couldn't sleep and would stare at the ceiling, wondering if life would just be this forever. But something had changed in me after that prayer on the balcony. My search, which was passive before, became active. I started to look. I knew it was dangerous. I knew the internet was monitored. But many of us, royal girls, used VPN software. It was an open secret. We used it to access blocked sites, buy things we shouldn't, see the world outside. And I started to use my VPN not to buy shoes, but to search for something. I didn't even know what. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I was just seeking anything that made sense, anything that would explain this hole I had in my chest. I started to read about philosophy. I read about other religions, which was an enormous risk. If someone saw my search history, I would be in serious trouble. I read about Buddhism, Hinduism. I read poetry. I was desperately looking for anything that would tell me why I felt like a stranger in my own life. And the people around me started to notice. My mother, especially. She is very observant. She kept asking me if I was feeling well, if I was sick. She worried that I was depressed, and I think, in a way, I was. She suggested I spend more time with my cousins, that I be more social, that I dress up more. She thought it was just the restlessness of a young woman who needed to get married soon. She didn't understand. Not in a million years would she understand that the idea of an arranged marriage, of a life I didn't choose, was exactly what was killing me. A marriage would only make the void even bigger, more permanent. My father barely noticed. He was too busy with his business, with his position in the court. I was just another daughter to be married off at the right time. He wasn't cruel. He was just distant. In our world, fathers and daughters don't have close relationships. Things just don't work that way. I want you to understand how I was feeling at that moment. Imagine having everything money can buy, and at the same time, having nothing. Imagine being surrounded by a huge family, but feeling completely alone in the universe. Imagine hearing every day that you have a perfect life while something inside you is dying inch by inch. That was me. That's who I was on that Thursday night in March, about 2 years ago. I was 22 years old. I was a princess in a palace. I had wealth, position, and education. I had a planned future, but I was drowning. I was drowning in the silence, in the emptiness, in the questions I couldn't ask. And I didn't know that night, as I went to bed in my expensive silk sheets with the view of the gardens outside, that I was about to meet someone who would change everything. I didn't know that God was about to invade my controlled world in a way I could never explain or ignore. That night, He came to me, in a dream. I need to try to explain this dream. And even now, so many years later, my hands shake a little when I try to find the words. Because what I experienced that night was not a normal dream. It wasn't like, those confusing images you forget 5 minutes after waking up. This was more real than the life I lived awake. It was more vivid than any memory I have, and it changed every atom of my being. I had gone to bed as usual. I said my prayers mechanically, my body bowing out of habit. I checked my phone one last time. I turned off the lights. And I remember clearly feeling particularly empty that night. The weight of my life seemed to be literally crushing me against the mattress. And I cried. I cried softly into my pillow so no one could hear me. Not for any specific reason, but for everything. For the accumulated sadness of just existing, without ever truly living. And it was in that state that I fell asleep. And the dream began. Immediately. There was no transition, no confusion. 1 second, I was in my bed, in my dark room in Riyadh, and the next second, I was standing in a garden. But it wasn't a garden like the ones at the palace. It was like nothing I had ever seen. The colors, I don't know how to describe them. They were more alive, more intense than anything in the real world. The grass beneath my bare feet was so green it almost seemed to glow from within. There were flowers everywhere, types of flowers I had never seen in my life, and their scent was overwhelming. But in a good way. It was the smell of life itself, if that makes any sense. The air felt different. It was lighter, easier to breathe, and there was a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature, but everything to do with a presence. I was wearing a simple white dress, not the expensive clothes I usually wore, and I was barefoot. And the strangest thing of all, I felt no fear. I was alone in a place I didn't know, which should have terrified me. But all I felt was peace, a deep peace, which I had never felt before, and an anticipation, like something wonderful was about to happen. And then I saw Him. He was walking toward me, coming through the middle of the garden. And I will fail in trying to describe Him, because there was something about Him that was beyond human description. He looked like a man, yes, but there was light, a light that came from within Him. Or maybe He was made of light, I don't know. His face was the kindest thing I have ever seen in my entire existence. His eyes, I will never, ever forget His eyes. They looked at me, Amira, and they saw me, truly. And the love that was in those eyes, it was so complete, so total, so pure, that I felt it physically, like a warm pressure in my chest. Logic says I should have been terrified. In my culture, a strange man approaching a woman is the worst thing that can happen. But I didn't feel a shred of fear. I just felt recognition. I felt that I knew Him, even though I was sure I had never seen Him before. I felt that I belonged to Him. He stopped a few feet from me and smiled. And that smile broke something inside me. It broke the wall, the shell, everything. And I started to cry right there. Then He spoke, and His voice, oh, I have no words. It was like nothing I had ever heard. It was gentle, but at the same time it had a power that felt like it could create stars and calm a child, all at the same time. His voice wasn't loud, but it didn't enter through my ears. It echoed inside me. And He called me by my name. He said, Amira. The way He said it, with such tenderness, with such affection. No one had ever said my name like that. And then He said something that made my knees buckle, and I fell to the grass. He called me my beloved daughter. I was my father's daughter, yes. But beloved, that word, it contained everything I had been searching for my entire life. In that second, I felt seen, completely seen, known, and loved in a way I didn't even know was possible. And the emptiness? That dark hole I had carried in my chest for as long as I could remember? It disappeared. It didn't just shrink. It simply vanished in an instant, as if it had never existed. I was whole. I was full. He told me he had called me by name, that I was his, that I had always been his, even when I didn't know him. He told me that the truth I was searching for, the one I asked for on the balcony, was written in a book that, he said, had been forbidden to me. He told me to come to him, and that with him I would find rest for my soul. Rest. I was so tired. And then he held out his hands to me, and I saw something that, in the dream, I didn't understand, but that, later, would make me cry for days. There were scars on the palms of his hands. They weren't open wounds, but healed scars. Marks. I remember staring at those marks, confused. Why would a man who was made of light have scars? But he just smiled at me again, with so much love, with so much compassion, that I couldn't look away from his face. The dream seemed to last for hours, but maybe it was only a few minutes. We didn't talk much more, but I felt him communicating with me, without words. I felt him pouring love into all the broken places inside me. I felt him healing me. I felt him claiming me, as if to say, "You are mine." And then he began to fade. Or maybe I began to wake up, I don't know. But the light started to dim, and I panicked. A panic I have never felt. I didn't want to go back. I didn't want him to leave. I tried to grab onto him, to stay in that garden forever. I reached my hand out to him, and I screamed. I think I screamed, "No." And the last thing I heard was his voice, clear as crystal, echoing in my mind. He said he would never leave me, that he would always be with me, and that I would know him by his name. And then, the next second, I was back. I woke up with a scream stuck in my throat, sitting bolt upright in my bed. My entire body was shaking. I was gasping for air as if I had run a marathon. My heart, I swear to God, my heart was beating so hard, so fast, it felt like it was going to break my ribs and burst out of my chest. Was I having a heart attack? I touched my face, and it was soaked. I had been crying in my sleep, but they weren't the sad tears from before. They were, I don't know. The room was dark. It was 3 or 4 in the morning. The air conditioner was humming. Everything was quiet, normal, but I was not the same. The person who had lain down in that bed hours before no longer existed. I sat there, in the dark, trembling, for I don't know how long. I didn't move. I was afraid that if I moved, the feeling would go away. The dream. Normal dreams. They fade, right? They're like smoke. You try to grab them, and they slip through your fingers in seconds. But this one wasn't fading. It was etched into my mind. I could see every detail. I could smell that garden. I could see his face, his eyes. I could feel the weight of his love like a warm blanket over me. I sat there until the first ray of sun began to peek through the crack in the curtain, and I realized that something fundamental had changed. The emptiness was gone, yes, but it had been replaced by something else. A new thing, a longing, a yearning so intense it physically hurt in my chest, a desperate desire to see him again, to go back to that garden, and to know. I needed to know. Who was he? The following days were an agony I can't even begin to describe. On the outside, I was the same Amira as always. I woke up, got dressed, had breakfast with my mother and sisters, went to my classes with the tutors. I went through the motions. But on the inside, I was a completely different person. I felt like a stranger in my own life. Everything around me, the marble, the silk clothes, the shallow conversations about parties and jewelry, it all seemed fake, flat, colorless. It was as if I had seen the world in vibrant color for the first time, and now everything had gone back to gray. I couldn't eat properly. Food had no taste. I couldn't sleep, and when I finally did, I prayed, I begged, to have that dream again. But it didn't return. I tried to pray my Muslim prayers, but the words felt like ash in my mouth. I even tried to ask for protection from shaitan, from demons, because that's what I was taught. If you have a strange dream, it's a jinn trying to trick you. But the more I tried to forget, the more I tried to tell myself it was just a dream, the stronger the memory of it became, the more real he seemed. My mother noticed, of course. She asked me if I was sick, if I needed a doctor. I lied. I said it must be a flu, that I was just tired. My sister Mariam, who knew me so well, she kept looking at me with genuine concern. She would say, "Amira, what's wrong with you? You seem different. You look like you're a million miles away." And I couldn't tell her. How could I explain what I didn't understand myself? How could I say that I saw a man made of light in a garden who called me beloved daughter, and now nothing else in the world made sense? She would think I was crazy, or worse, possessed, and she would tell our father. So I just smiled, a fake smile that didn't reach my eyes, and said it was just stress from classes. I felt more alone than ever, but now, with a longing in my chest that I didn't know how to heal. I needed to know who he was. I needed to know his name. About a week after the dream, I did something dangerous. It was the middle of the night. The entire compound was silent. I waited until I was absolutely sure everyone was asleep. I locked my bedroom door, and I got my laptop. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my neck. I connected to my VPN, choosing a server far away in Asia. My hands were shaking so much I could barely type. I opened the browser and stared at the blank search bar. What was I going to search for? Man of light in a garden? I would sound like a lunatic. I tried to be logical. I typed the things I remembered, the things that had stood out. I typed, Dream Garden White Man, Dream Man Light. And then, with my heart in my throat, I typed the thing that had marked me the most, scars on hands. And I hit Enter. I don't know what I expected to find, but the results that started appearing on the screen, my body froze. I felt the blood drain from my face. They were images, articles, websites, and they all spoke about the same person. Jesus, Isa, to us, the Christian prophet. The one we were taught was a good man, a messenger, but nothing more. The one Christians claimed was the Son of God, which to us was the greatest of blasphemies. I slammed the laptop screen shut so hard it made a loud noise in the silence of the room. I threw myself back in my chair, my heart racing. No, it couldn't be. No way. This was impossible. This was the worst possible thing. It was a trick. It had to be. Terror washed over me. An icy terror that started at the base of my spine and crept up my neck. This wasn't just dangerous. This was the final line. It was the ultimate betrayal. In our culture, in our family, in our country, being interested in Christianity wasn't a curiosity. It was a crime. Studying it was dangerous. But believing in that meant death. Social death at the very least. Being disowned, dishonored. And in some cases, I knew, physical death. Apostasy was not tolerated. It was the worst sin. It was worse than murder. I sat there in the dark, shaking, telling myself to stop, to forget, to delete the history, turn off the computer, and never think about it again. It was just a dream, a weird dream, nothing more, but I couldn't. I couldn't stop thinking about his face, about the love I felt, and those scars. I needed to know. Even terrified, I needed to know. I took a deep breath, opened the laptop again, and I started to search for Jesus. I should have stopped there. Any sane person, any girl in my position, would have closed the laptop, said the prayers for protection, and tried to forget everything. But I couldn't. The love I felt in that garden was more real than the fear I was feeling now. The man I saw was more real than the palace around me. I needed to understand. So in the following weeks, I began a double life that was absolutely terrifying. I lived in a constant state of high alert. I only used my laptop in the dead of night, locked in my room with the VPN always on, checking the door every 5 minutes. I started to research. I watched videos on YouTube. I found channels of people talking about Jesus. I listened to testimonies from, and this terrified me, Other Muslims, people who grew up like me and who had converted to Christianity. I listened to their stories, and my heart was in my throat. It was so risky. I knew if anyone found out what I was watching, I would be in trouble I couldn't even imagine. But what caught my attention the most, what hooked me, was the way these people talked about God. They called him Father. They talked about a relationship, about knowing God personally, about his love. And this was so different from everything I knew. The God I was taught was distant, untouchable, a judge to be feared and obeyed, but never known, never to have a relationship with. These Christians spoke with an intimacy, a certainty that they were loved. It was the same feeling I had in the garden. I discovered that there were Bible apps. I almost died of fear just thinking about downloading one. What if my father checked my phone? But the desire to know was stronger. I downloaded one that had a disguised icon. It looked like a calculator app. It was brilliant. And in the dead of night, when the house was in absolute silence, I would lock myself in the bathroom, which was the only place with a solid internal lock, and I would turn on the dim makeup light and I would read. I started to read where someone in a video said to start, the Gospel of John, and I don't know how to explain this. It was as if I had been dying of thirst my entire life, and for the first time, someone gave me water. Pure, fresh water. Every word I read felt like it was being written directly on my heart. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And then I read the verse that broke me. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Rest. It was what he had promised me in the dream. I was there, sitting on the cold marble floor of my luxurious bathroom, crying softly, with my hand over my mouth to muffle the sound. The Jesus of this book was the man from my dream. It was him. I was absolutely sure. But along with this certainty, with this living water I was drinking, came a terrible fear. A fear that paralyzed me. What was I doing? What was happening to me? If someone caught me, if my family found out I was reading the Christian Bible, I would be destroyed. They would disown me. They could lock me up inside the compound forever. I didn't even want to think. I had heard stories, whispers, of family honor, of people who converted and simply disappeared. I tried to stop, several times. I deleted the Bible app. I promised myself I would forget everything, that I would go back to being a good Muslim daughter. But I couldn't. It was like trying to stop breathing. Jesus kept calling me. The love I felt in that garden kept pulling me. The truth I was reading in those words. It echoed in every empty part of me. I couldn't stay away. I was in love with the one I was reading about, and I was terrified of what that meant for my life. About 2 months after the dream, 2 months of living in this fear and this secret discovery, I remembered someone. Her name popped into my mind like a light. Sophia. She had been my friend years ago, when I was younger, and briefly studied at an international school in Riyadh. Her family was Filipino, and she was a Christian. I remembered that. She never talked about her faith around me. She was careful. She knew the risks. But I knew. We had kept in vague contact over social media through the years, and I knew she had returned to Riyadh. She was working as a nurse in one of the big hospitals. I spent 3 whole days just staring at her name on my phone. 3 days, with my heart in my throat. Sending her a message was an absurd risk. What if she told someone? What if she thought I was trying to set a trap for her? But I was desperate. I needed to talk to a human being. I couldn't bear to keep this inside alone anymore. Finally, I typed a message. I kept it vague, careful. Hey, Sophia, remember me? I'm in Riyadh, would love to get coffee. She replied almost immediately, super enthusiastic. And we set a time at a Western-style cafe in an expatriate compound. I was terrified, but I went. I had to go. I was terrified the entire way there. I told my private driver I was meeting a cousin and asked him to drop me off at the entrance of the expatriate compound. I'll call you when I'm ready to go back, I said, trying to sound casual. He looked at me in the rearview mirror for a second longer than usual. Or maybe it was just my paranoia. At that point, I thought everyone could read on my forehead what was happening to me. I entered the compound. I was wearing my abaya and my face was covered, as always. But underneath, my clothes were sticking to my body with cold sweat. I was shaking so much I could barely walk straight. Every person who passed me looked like an undercover agent from the religious police. I was sure this was a trap, that I had been an idiot, that Sophia had told someone that they were waiting for me, but I was too desperate to turn back. I saw the cafe, and I saw her through the glass. Sophia. She was sitting at a table in the corner with a warm smile on her face. When she saw me, she waved, and for a second, my panic subsided. Just a little. I went in. I sat down across from her. We ordered coffee, and then, the torture of small talk. She asked about my family. I asked about her work as a nurse. She was being nice, normal, and I was sitting there, smiling and nodding, while inside I was screaming. My heart was trying to escape through my throat. I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't pretend I was there to talk about the weather. I needed to know. I needed answers. I waited for her to finish talking about a patient, and then I couldn't hold back. I leaned across the table, and I whispered. I couldn't speak loudly. I said, Sophia, I need to ask you something. Something important. About your faith. I saw her face change instantly. The smile vanished. Caution flooded her eyes. She glanced to the sides quickly to see if anyone at the next table was listening. The cafe was full of Westerners, but it was still Riyadh. The danger was real. For both of us. She leaned in toward me, her face serious now. She spoke so softly I could barely hear her. Amira, what do you mean? What kind of questions? She was scared. I could see it. And the fact that she was scared only confirmed the scale of the danger I was in. But I had already gone too far. I took a deep breath, and the words poured out of me in a desperate rush. I told her. I didn't tell her everything, not the details, but I said enough. I whispered about the dream, about a man who appeared to me, about the peace I felt. I told her I had been reading the Bible in secret on my phone. I said, I think I'm being drawn to Jesus, and I don't know what to do. I'm so scared, Sophia. I think I'm going crazy. Saying those words out loud to another person was the most terrifying thing I have ever done. I felt naked. I had just handed her the power to destroy me. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. She didn't look scared for me. She looked emotional. She kept looking around, checking, but she reached her hand across the table and, in an incredibly brave gesture in public, she touched the back of my hand for just a second. Amira, she whispered, and her voice was thick with emotion. You're not crazy. You're not being deceived. What you're experiencing, it's God. It's Jesus. He is calling you. I felt my own tears start to fall, dripping onto my lap. She told me that Jesus loved me, that he had died for me, that he knew my name. She was confirming everything I had been reading, everything I felt in that garden. She was telling me it wasn't a trap. It was real. And then, she did the most dangerous and kindest thing anyone has ever done for me. She looked around once more, reached into her handbag, which was on the floor, and pulled something out. It was a small, dark-covered book. She kept it below the level of the table. She pushed it onto my lap, under the table. Hide this, she whispered. Hide it with your life. It's a New Testament, in Arabic. I froze. To have this, to carry this, was 1,000 times more dangerous than an app on my phone. If I was caught with this, there would be no way to deny it. It was physical proof of my betrayal. I took that book. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. It was small. It fit in the palm of my hand, but it felt like it weighed 100 pounds. It felt like it was on fire. I shoved it deep into my purse, under my designer wallet and my cell phone, my heart pounding so hard I was sure the whole coffee shop could hear it. I could barely speak. I just looked at Sophia, my eyes probably screaming the terror I felt. We left the cafe separately, as planned. I called my driver. The 200-meter walk from the cafe to the compound entrance felt like I was walking on broken glass. I was sure everyone knew. That the guards at the gate could see the shape of the book through my bag, through my abaya. I sat in the back of the SUV, completely rigid, the whole way to the palace. My driver tried to make conversation, and I could only answer in monosyllables. My hand was inside my bag, clutching the book. It was a time bomb. It was a beacon. It was the most dangerous thing I had ever touched in my life, and, at the same time, the most precious. As soon as I got to my room, I didn't even take off my abaya. I ran to my closet, that enormous closet, and went to the very back, behind rows and rows of dresses I never wore. I had a small box of things from my childhood, things I wouldn't let the servants throw away. I buried the book there, under old drawings and a teddy bear. Only then did I feel like I could breathe. That night, I waited until I was absolutely, positively sure that the entire compound was asleep. 3 a.m. I crept out of bed, got the book from the box, and went back to my safe place, the locked bathroom. But it was so different from reading on a phone. The phone was cold, it was digital, it was pixels. This was a book. It had pages, it had weight. I could feel the thin texture of the paper between my fingers. I could smell the ink and the paper. It made it all real, permanent. The words in Arabic, my own language, were not something I could just delete with a click. They were printed. They were solid. I read until my eyes burned, devouring the Gospels one by one. And the more I read, the more I knew him, the more I fell in love with him. Jesus, the man from my dream. He was everything I read and so much more. I was living a double life, and the tension was killing me. It was crushing me. During the day, I was Amira bint Abdullah, the perfect, obedient, pious daughter. I wore the abaya. I covered my face. I went to the mosque with my family. I sat with my mother and my aunts and listened to the empty conversations about arranged marriages and jewelry. I bowed and recited the Arabic prayers that I no longer believed. And every time I knelt in the direction of Mecca, I felt like a fraud. I felt like I was betraying my family by hiding this secret. And I felt like I was betraying Jesus by pretending to be a Muslim. Every word of a prayer that was not to him felt like poison in my mouth. I was trapped. I had found the truth he said would set me free, but I was still locked in the same golden cage. And now, the cage felt 1,000 times tighter, because I finally knew it existed. The loneliness. The loneliness was the worst part, worse even than the constant fear. I had found the most beautiful, most important thing in the universe, and I couldn't tell a single soul. I had no one to talk to. I would read the New Testament and my head would explode with questions. What does this really mean? How am I supposed to pray now? What do I do? I would send careful messages to Sophia, using codes we had arranged, but it wasn't the same. She was a nurse, worked long hours, and it was a huge risk for her to be talking to me. I needed more. I needed people. I read in the book of Acts, about how the first Christians met together. They ate together, prayed together, sang together. They were a family, and I was starving for that. I was desperate for fellowship. I finally said this to Sophia in a quick, static-filled call on a secure app. I told her, "Sophia, I can't stand being alone in this anymore. I need others." I could feel her hesitation, the fear on the line. And then, after a silence that lasted an eternity, she said there was something, a place, a secret group of Christians, mostly Filipinos and other expatriate workers, but some Saudis like me, a house church. Just the idea of going felt like jumping off a cliff in the dark, but the idea of not going felt even worse.
Amira's story proves that there are no walls, whether of stone or of privilege, that can stop the call of Jesus. What about you? Have you ever had to risk everything for what you believe in? Leave your opinion about this incredible testimony here in the comments. We really want to know what you felt hearing this story. If this content touched your heart, subscribe to the channel now and hit the bell. All notifications. This is very important so that YouTube will notify you and you won't miss the next transformative videos we are preparing. Don't leave yet. The next recommended video, the continuation of this story or a related testimony, is already appearing here on the screen. Click on it and continue to be blessed. Thank you, and God bless you.